Hi, my name is Chuck D'Antonio, and I'm Director of Solutions Engineering for Replicated. Today I want to talk to you about your self-managed offering. I'll get to what I mean by that in a minute, but I've been out in a lot of different software companies, and we've had software that we've managed as a SaaS, we've had software that we've delivered to our customers, been in companies where I wrote first-party software, and I've noticed something about particularly sales teams, but sometimes even product and support teams. Actually, you know what? The support teams a lot too. A lot of times we are afraid of the offering that we have that our customers manage for themselves. That self-managed offering. So you might not have anything that you call self-managed, so I want to clarify that term a little bit before we get started, right? I've heard this called many different things. Sometimes it's the on-prem offering. Sometimes it's the cloud-prem offering because you make it available in a cloud marketplace. Sometimes it's the enterprise or the server offering. Maybe customer managed. You may use any of a number of different terms for your offering that's delivered this way. But what I want to talk about is the software that you deliver for your customers to install into an environment that they control, or at least someone they delegate to controls, and then they run that software for themselves rather than you running it for them. We don't really care where they run it, which is why I don't use the term on-premise anymore. They could be running it in a colo, they could be running it in their own data center, they could be running it in a cloud environment. They could even be the same cloud environment as your SaaS, just under their account rather than under yours. So all of these things would be the offering that they're managing themselves, and so we'll call it self-managed. And one more thing before we get started, I'm making a couple of assumptions in this presentation. The assumptions that I'm making are that your company already has a self-managed offering, right? So you're not, maybe out considering this right now. It's something that's already available for you to position to your customers. But maybe you're not selling as much as you'd like. Maybe you're not super confident about selling it. Maybe it's not going as well as you thought. And the next assumption is that you're a seller or of some sort, or at least someone who supports and loves them. You can be an account executive, you can be a solution engineer, you can be a leader of one of those teams, or you could be in product or an exec who wants to make sure those people going out to market and getting the revenue for your company are being successful. And the most important thing that's an assumption here is that you want to be successful. You want to be successful with your entire product offering. The SaaS that you might deliver, the version that your customer installs in their own environment, that self-managed on-prem enterprise server, whatever it is that you call that environment, you want to be successful with your entire product range in all its ways of being distributed to all of your customers. With that in mind, let's take a look at the three topics that we're going to talk about today. The first one is why you want to sell your self-managed offering. You're here, so I'm assuming that you want to sell it, even if maybe you are a little afraid of that. And the simple answer to this question, quite frankly, is because customers want to buy it, but we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Then we're going to talk about some of the misconceptions that we all, as sellers out in the field, have about our self-managed offerings. I've had them. You probably have some of them, and so we're going to talk about them and why they're misconceptions, and maybe even a little bit about why we think that's the case. And then we're going to talk about what it means to be successful at selling your self-managed offering. What do you need to know? How do you need to approach things? Just a couple of tips on being more successful with that. So first, let's ask that question. Why do we want to sell the self-managed offering? And you notice that I'm starting with why you want to sell it, not why do customers want to buy it. We'll touch that a little bit when we talk about this thing, but the real idea behind why customers want to buy it is they do. And why do we want to engage with them in a way that we're telling them, no, you really don't want that. You want to buy our SaaS, or no, we've got this managed offering that's going to be much better for you, right? I was talking to one of my account executives, and he was saying, why do I want to start my relationship off that way, right? With this sort of confrontational stance where I'm asking you to reconsider something that you consider a fundamental requirement of yours. I don't want to start conversations that way, and I'm sure you don't either. But let's look at it a little bit from our perspective and why we want to sell it. First of all, it's going to open up your territory, right? If you are not confidently selling your on-premise offerings, and notice I say confidently in there, then you're not getting everything out of your territory that you can. The other thing is, you want to make sure you edge out your competition. Maybe they don't have an on-premise offering, or maybe they don't have as strong of a self-managed offering in the market, right? You want to be able to beat those competitors. And then, of course, you want to close larger deals. We're going to look at some numbers around that and why we think you can close larger deals and what we've seen in the marketplace. So first of all, Your self-managed offering, it is going to open up your territory, right? It's going to help you access customers with more complex security and compliance regimes, right? Doesn't matter, what they do to their networks, what their policies are, all of those things. If they take that software in-house and then they deploy it into that environment that they control, then they're going to be able to meet a lot more of those requirements that way than by working with you and your SaaS team to get there, right? And that includes things like air-gapped networks, right? For some very large air-gapped customers, say the United States Department of Defense, maybe you'd stand up a SaaS instance for them. But what about a utility that just air-gaps off certain things? You're probably not going to set up a managed offering in that situation. So you can start to access those customers that maybe you would have had to turn away in the past. The next thing that helps open up your territory is that you can get into a lot of large enterprises, again, with those quirky ideas about how infrastructure should be run and how you should connect to them and all of those things, without having to worry about supporting those, without having to go back to your product team and say, how do we connect this thing into our SaaS environment? How do we make sure that we meet these controls that they've guaranteed their regulators that they adhere to? All of those conversations go away, right? You get your software into their environment and they start implementing and installing it, and it's in there, it's meeting their unique infrastructure needs and running their environment. In fact, there's ways you can package your software and things you can package with your software that you can make sure that it's going to comfortably install and run successfully in that environment. We can talk about those at another time. That's some things that are part of the replicated platform in our offering, but I'm not going to talk about those features right now. There's a little bit more detail in the platform that I'm going to talk about today. And the last is, there are organizations that maybe from the get-go, with the control that they want, you're not able to approach them today, right? You can't go in to certain government agencies and say, come on, run this thing here in our managed environment, our SaaS environment. Healthcare institutions who have concerns about HIPAA. What if you won't sign a BAA with them? Then you can't manage something for them. And if you sign one and you haven't taken the right steps, you could potentially bankrupt your company because of that agreement you've made with them. And you don't want to be in that situation, right? Let them worry about their data and the privacy and security and confidentiality constraints around it. Financial firms, you run into a lot of the same things, right? Highly regulated, high compliance regimes. These are tough places to sell any software solution. And when you then have to sell them on how you manage, how you operate, how you deploy, what your infrastructure looks like, what your networking looks like, what your security processes are to protect their data in your data center, your cloud environment, whatever that may be, a lot of them are just going to say, no, we just want the control over that. And now, again, there's a customer that you're not able to approach and you're not able to have success with. So you're going to have a lot more folks in your territory to call on if you get confident in selling your on-premise, your self-managed solution. Another thing you're going to do in this scenario is you're going to edge out your competition, right? There are 42% of companies that admit to losing revenue by not offering a self-managed solution. 42% that admit it in a survey, right? And note down here, link down here, Dimensional Research did this research. And so that's 42% that admit it, which means there's probably a much larger number that are losing revenue there. If they're losing revenue because they don't have that self-managed offering, that means their sellers are also losing opportunities and losing income. But for you, who have that self-managed offering, it means you can come in and you can scoop up that revenue and you can take that income that their sellers didn't get, right? So that's pretty impressive. If a big chunk of your competition can't do it and are losing revenue to it, you can go out and do it. 65% of companies that aren't providing a self-managed offering plan to in the future. I'm not quite sure what kind of plans those are, right? Those might be the type of plans that, someday it's on the roadmap, it might happen, it's a someday maybe, right? Or it might be a plan where, hey, we've prioritized it and it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years out. Or it might be we've prioritized it and then next quarter they push it out. And then the quarter after that they push it out. And then the quarter after that they push it out. So again, you've got a whole bunch of companies out there that don't have this offering, are saying they want to do it, and are giving you an opening to come in and beat them in the market with your offering that you already have. And then the last thing is that customers who have an on-premise solution, a self-managed solution for themselves, they produce 6 times more revenue for the companies that they're buying from when they manage their own instance than they would if they were using your SaaS option. So not only is that good in terms of your company being more successful in that competition, but it's good for you in terms of your competition to go to club, to be the leader in your region, to to maximize this year's income relative to goals you've set for yourself. Right, gives you the opportunity to be a lot more successful with that revenue gain. So related to that 6 times larger number, you're going to be able to close larger deals when you work with the self-managed solution. You're going to deliver more ARR per account, right? If the customers are investing their time and their energy in managing and controlling your software, bringing it into their environment, dedicating the hardware, dedicating the people, all of those things, it's probably pretty critical to their business or deals with some of their most critical and sensitive data. In that case, they're willing to pay a lot more for the value that you provide than if it's some sort of peripheral commodity process that runs within their industry or in their business. So you can deliver more ARR per account because of that. And also, they're often willing to pay a lot more for the option to secure and control that software themselves. So you can potentially have a higher average selling price if you're selling in the self-managed option. Also, because the customers are making a bigger commitment, right? They're committing those resources, they're committing those people, they're committing that time and energy. They're likely making a bigger commitment to you and to your company than to other vendors that they're working with. So this will give you an opportunity to better understand their needs, to get closer to them, and help you to grow their business over time. Not only with that organization that they're working for today, but potentially down the road at the organization they work at after that, and the organization they work at after that, and the organization they work at after that, right? So you can forge that long-term relationship with that individual just based on their decision, and that team, any member of the team really that you're working with, just based on their decision to invest in bringing in your solution in the self-managed offering. Hopefully you're starting to think a little bit differently about how you can be successful with your self-managed offering, but there may still be some ideas that you're holding on to that are making you still a little uncomfortable, still a little bit afraid, and that's okay. I've had a lot of these ideas over the years, and I've learned to think of them a little bit differently since I've come to Replicated and learned a little bit more about how these things can really be overcome. So the first one is that your customers aren't interested, and fair enough. Some of them aren't going to be. Perhaps even many of them aren't going to be. But do you really want to say no to the ones that are? I don't want to. I want to talk to every customer that'll talk to me, and that my product can make successful. Can help make them successful. It's also a common misconception that these deals are slower and they're harder to close. I think this comes from things like the POV is going to take longer, or it's going to take them a bunch of time to get access to resources, and get people allocated and all those things. Whereas I can just spin something up in my SaaS and get running forward, right? That's fair enough, right? Those things have probably happened to you. They've happened to me, but that just means that somewhere in your organization you didn't have the right tools and you didn't put them in the right person's hands in order to be able to accelerate those deals. We find actually, through different vendors that we work with, that a lot of these deals move a lot faster. And there's various reasons for that. And then, the last one is that it's harder to support and satisfy customers. There's a place I worked before where the burden for support for the customers who were self-managed was substantially larger than the SaaS environment. We have customers that Replicated where that was the case before they started engaging with us and improving the ways that they make their applications supportable, deliverable, installable for those end customers. So it doesn't have to be hard to support those customers. And actually, there's some data that shows something very surprising about how satisfied they are, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. So your customers are definitely interested. Why are they interested? Which customers does that mean are going to be interested, right? They're generally interested for 3 core reasons. They're interested for security, right? The data that they want to use your application with is data that they want to keep very secure. They are interested in not being breached. The more connections they have to different environments, the more likely they are going to be breached because of a supplier's breach rather than a breach of their own. I'm not saying anything about your company's security. I'm just saying that, all of us are out there. Every single company is at risk of a security breach. The more that we connect to other companies, the more we store our data with other companies, the more likely a breach of one of those companies is either going to impact our data or it's going to impact the security of our own systems because of the connections we made between them. So a lot of companies now, they're minimizing the number of third parties they want to rely on, and they're narrowing down to the largest and the safest, and not necessarily wanting every vendor to have access to the data to connect networks with them, all of those sorts of things. A related idea is the confidentiality of their data assets. There's things that not only do they want to keep secure, but they also need to keep confidential. That could be because of regulatory regimes, or it can be because it's things like really critical intellectual property. They a lot of times want to keep this data away even from you. And, especially with some of the products that you might be bringing out into the market, it's very hard because of the state that data has to be in for you to process it, whether you're dealing with AI models, or you're dealing with source code, or any of a number of different things. It's not like it can be fully encrypted and totally inaccessible to your folks in order for that confidentiality to be guaranteed. So by running it on systems that your folks don't have any access to at all, they're able to increase the confidentiality of that data. And the last is control. And sometimes, quite frankly, control comes from bad motivations, right? We've always done it this way. We don't trust you. We have our process and we need to follow it, all of those things. But other times it comes from a better place, right? And it comes from a place that they have availability requirements that are really stringent, and maybe things that you can't provide in your SaaS. It comes from life cycle objectives they might have around how they upgrade software, how they upgrade the underlying infrastructure. When do they replace systems, and all of these different topics, right? Imagine someone who wants to repave every production server every day. If you don't do that in your SaaS, you've lost that customer unless you give them their self-managed offering. So there's a lot of different things, and they also want to control things like when they upgrade their software, which are a lot harder to control when they're in a SaaS environment. Now, there might be some of you thinking, but I want them on my latest version, and so do I. I want every customer that I work with to be running the latest version of everything that Replicated has to offer. There's ways that you can assure that. And you can work with them to make sure they know what the latest version is, work to make sure that you know what version they're on, look for drift and things like that. Again, when we go into more detail about the features of the Replicated platform in some other webinar, some other conversation, I probably will talk about some of those things. But I just want to say for now that those things exist. So your deals don't have to slow down because you're using the self-managed offering. First of all, you can simplify the technical evaluation, right? If you use the right tools for customers to deploy your software, you make it easier for them to get started on a POV, you get easier for them to do the evaluations they need, and you make it easier for your team to work with them. So say, for example, you've got an application running several microservices and it runs on a Kubernetes cluster that you expect your customer to provide, right? That can feel a little daunting in terms of how are we going to make sure they're successful with that? Again, what if you gave them a graphical installer that could allow them to quickly install into that? That's something that would make it so that whether it's your team, an SE out there working with them, or whether it's the customer working on their own, you can simplify that evaluation of what they're doing. You can anticipate the deployment challenges they might have, right? Imagine you could validate the environment before they even get started and stop poor evaluation experiences, right? One of the things that, coming from the SE world especially, right? One of the things that makes me cringe sometimes is when a customer of mine says to me, we'll get started. We'll let you know when we want some help. All right. Some of that's just me and my ego, right? I want to help. I know that I'm going to be going a little faster than they are. I'm going to be a little more facile with my stuff than they are. I feel like they're going to get a better evaluation experience that they work with when they work with me. But some of that's real, right? I don't know the skill set of the people who are getting started in that evaluation. I might know about some quirky things about my software that the docs don't say aren't super clear about. I might know that, folks might take a system that I say, oh, you need, a cluster with multiple nodes and this much memory and this much CPU in each one, and try to install it on, a VM on their desktop. I know a lot of this because of my experience, especially that last one. I do it all the time. But imagine you could validate those environments before they install and stop them and say, you're going to have a bad experience if you move forward here. Maybe even still let them move forward, or maybe just say, nah, I'm not ready to install right now. Right there in the software. That does a couple of things. Number one, it prevents that bad experience that they would have had. And number two, it drives them to have a conversation with you, whether you're the AE or the SC. It drives them to pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, let's talk about this. What does this mean? How come I can't move forward with this evaluation? I know it's probably not the phone, it's probably Slack, but you get the gist. The other thing, this is fairly surprising, but the self-managed offering actually will accelerate the security approval process. And it's kind of counterintuitive because you're thinking, hey, we're going to put this new thing into that customer environment. Aren't they going to be like most stringent around understanding that? And that's sort of what I thought too. And I got into some conversations with some folks, and we're finding that they're faster. And the reason that they're faster is because all that's happening is they're bringing something into their environment that they can even run in a very controlled place and watch and monitor and be aware of. Versus if they're taking data to you, right? When they bring the system to the data, they can isolate it even from the data and from any place it can do harm while they figure out what it does. When they bring the data to you, bring the data to the application, they've got to make sure that not only does that application not do anything funky, but that all of the operational procedures around it, all of the individuals working with it, everything that's done around security, et cetera, passes muster. That's a far longer review process than just, hey, what's this thing going to do when it hits in our environment? And especially if we're just saying, what's it going to do when it hits in our dev environment so that we can start playing with it? So the last misconception is about keeping customers happy and supporting them. Most interesting piece of data I've seen from research that's been done around the work that we do at Replicated is that 93% of self-managed customers are happy with their software. It's pretty impressive, really. 93% of satisfaction is a big number. And it's an even bigger number when you think of the fact that they're putting more effort into the self-managed software than they're putting into working with a SaaS. I like those odds, though. 93% of my customers are going to be happy with my solution. I want them to have that solution. And then, supportability is a challenge for any piece of software. And we often think that the SaaS is going to be easier to support because we're right there, we're operating it. We got all sorts of monitoring and telemetry and observability and all these different things. So we can look and we can see exactly what's happening to that customer right now. Well, just because the system's running in their environment doesn't mean we can't help them out that way. Sure, we can't log in and just sort of ad hoc go through the system and understand what's going on. But we can make that system collect the data that it needs in order for me to support it. We can collect telemetry that tells me if this customer system is up and running, that tells me when they last upgraded, that tells me all the information I need to know to understand the experience that they're having. So maybe as the seller, the SE, the account team, I don't necessarily need that information, right? And let the support team's dealing with all of that. But that makes the job of that support team easier, which makes getting help from my company easier, which makes my customer happier. I like to think that right now, you're already scheming about new account plans and new sales motions around that self-managed offering that you've maybe been avoiding a little bit in the past. And if I've done my job, at least some of you are. And but let's talk a little bit about what you need to do to succeed with those motions and those account plans. And success around the self-managed sale is really around understanding how it's different, and some of the things you need and tools you need in order to be successful with it. And honestly, I could probably do an entire another video around this, entire another webinar around this, and I probably will. We're trying to make a series out of this, and I'll even probably talk with some of our customers who've been super successful doing this around the things that they do. But let's look at a high level at the things that can help you be successful. First of all, you need to meet your customers where they are. Right? They're gonna be very different levels of sophistication, many decisions made around what their environments look like, their platforms look like. You need to be ready for that. Both your product team needs to produce a product that's ready for that, and you as an account team, remember that account team need to be ready for it. You also need to have the right assets ready. There's different assets they're going to ask for. There's different things you're going to need in order to take them through from that first discovery meeting, through all the technical win steps, through into the contract phase. You want to have all those things ready. And you want to have some insight into what's going on so you can see how well those trials and those POVs are proceeding. You want to see if there's any signs that things are going super well or maybe less than well. And we'll talk a little bit about that. This is one thing that we sometimes fear losing when we move from a SaaS environment into our customer's environment, is that are we going to be able to understand and see all the things we do around those customers' instances and how they're working with us? Short answer is yes. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So first of all, you want to meet your customer where they are. Don't worry too much about these pictures. They're kind of busy, but first thing you got to understand, this is just a common maturity model for people on their cloud native or Kubernetes journey, right? And you've built an application. It's a modern application. It's various degrees of cloud native architecture involved in it. You probably have heard all these things when you went to sales training, and if you're an SE, you probably have some opinions about how well your product does it or not. But when you go out and you talk to your customers, you're going to say things like, "Hey, we take advantage of Kubernetes for things like that." Hopefully later in the process, not in that first meeting. We take advantage of Kubernetes for things like availability and resiliency, and it allows us to run a bunch of different services, and this is how our architecture works. Again, hopefully you're not having that discussion in your first discovery meeting, but over time they're gonna hear those things, and some customers are gonna look at you and they're gonna say, "Awesome. We have all these opinions about how our Kubernetes platform runs, and I hope you can deal with all of them." And others are going to talk to you and say, "Probably pretty good. I heard that's a cool thing." And you really need to be able to have those discussions with those types of customers, regardless of where they are on that spectrum. You might have to lean into some pretty specific details. Even as an account executive, around what your application does with those more sophisticated, more mature customers of yours. Certainly as an SE you will. And then for those less secure customers, perhaps you have to reassure them. Maybe they have a way of doing things, and they've thought about, maybe we'll do some exploration of Kubernetes. It seems to be the way a lot of different things are going, but we've heard it's complicated, or we've heard it's a big deal and it's a big change. And so you need to be able to have the conversations to make them comfortable with the fact that we can deploy our software on any old virtual machine, just like you installed something else. And you don't have to know much about the fact that Kubernetes is running under the hood. So that takes a couple of things. Number one, it takes the confidence for you as a member of the account team and the other members of the account team you work with to have those conversations. And also it takes potentially some things that your product does. The engineers, your product managers, that they do in order to make sure that you can meet those customers of different maturity levels. The other thing you need to do is you need to make sure you fit your solution into their landscape, right? You've probably seen this picture. If you haven't, this is what they call the CNCF landscape. It's all the projects, products, services, etc., that make up the cloud native community around things like Kubernetes and cloud native architecture and other aspects of modern application development. Your company might even have a box in here. The reason I show this is just to point out that there's all these places that your customers can make decisions about how their platform's going to run. So again, for those less sophisticated customers, they maybe haven't made a ton of decisions. Maybe they've even looked at some of these boxes and said, we don't need that part right now. And great, you're going to be able to, be fairly opinionated and give them a very easy on-ramp and have a very value-oriented discussion and not really get into the weeds of all these things. For others, they're going to have made a lot of decisions and they're potentially going to be really opinionated about them. You need to be able to stand by a solution that can run with the constraints that all of those decisions place on it. Again, this is going to be a lot more for your product team and your engineers to worry about, but you need to be a little bit facile as well to be able to engage in those conversations and know maybe what some of the products in each of these boxes are, so that when people are talking about what they have in their environment, you're nodding and like, yep, we can handle that, no problem. You're also going to, hopefully, your engineering teams can do a lot of testing around those different variations, and they're going to give, through that testing, they're going to be able to confidently say all the things they do, and you're going to be able to confidently stand behind it. Next important thing to being successful is having the right assets ready, right? Number one way you can win in a self-managed sale beyond, delivering the value that your customer expects is that delivery, right? If you can get your software in their hands, give them a really smooth, clean installation experience, get them up and running with minimal stress, not falling into a lot of holes, then you got a huge leg up on your competition because a lot of people can't do it. Sure, they got something that their customers can install in their own environment, but they got to run through a huge dock. They got to do a bunch of things over here before they even get started. Then they got to do a few steps in that dock, and then they got to jump and do a few other things that aren't related to to the product they're trying to install. And then they got to come back to those instructions, and oops, they missed something 2 pages ago, and they got to start over. If you can give them a nice experience, a couple of commands, handle everything they need in order to get going, then you're going to win on delivery. Part of that is being ready for what they need to know. Being able to validate the assumptions that your application makes, right? So let's talk about that readiness. Security is going to have a lot of questions. Networking is going to be looking for instructions. Architecture is probably going to have an opinion. The more you do up front, have the material ready for those teams, right? Think pre-filled security questionnaires. There's some standards out there now for what security questionnaires should look like. Having one of those filled out and accessible and available to every SE to hand over and say, yep, here we go, can oftentimes get you around having to do a security questionnaire process that's bespoke and unique to that customer. I've had that happen to me a few times. They send me over a questionnaire and I say, hey, I've got this over here, CIQ. Oh yeah, you do? Cool. Let's use that. No big deal. Or you've got a document that says, here's an evaluation based on the NIST controls. Oh, cool. We use a slightly different set of standards, but we know that's a good one. Let's take a look and see that they match up. Occasionally, they're going to say, yeah, we still need ours. But the person's going to be filling that out, whether someone in your security team, it's you as the SE, or it's your partner SE if you're an AE. You're going to be able to just copy paste from that pre-prepared document into their document. You're going to probably get 80-90% of their questions answered. So having those types of assets ready. What do we need to do to our network? How does the firewall have to be opened up? Does the firewall have to be opened up? Ideally, the answer to that question is no, right? Networking comes along and says, what do you have to do with the firewall? Nothing. Great. They're happy, they've approved. What do they need for DNS? Organizations can be incredibly modern and automated in how they do things, and still DNS can be really painful. What if you can get out in front during a demo meeting when you're talking about when might we start a POV and say, oh, by the way, here's what networking needs to know about the firewall. Here's what networking or whomever else it does that manages DNS needs to know about DNS. This is what we expect about your Kubernetes cluster, and here's a script that you can go download and run, see if your cluster adheres to it. You do all that when you're setting up the planning meeting for the POV. They've got some homework that they can go and make sure that they've got an environment and they've got all the things ready that they need. So you need those assets. You need to be ready in order to do those things. And the last thing, this is kind of more for the most sophisticated folks probably right now, but it's going to be important over time. Is what assurance can you provide them in terms of the supply chain for your software? Talk with your engineering team about that. Ask them if they're producing the right assets. And are they putting digital signatures on their artifacts? Are they creating SBOMs? You're going to hear that word a lot if you're not hearing it already, right? Software bill of materials. What goes into this thing that I'm about to bring into my environment? That's going to be a very important question to answer. And it's very easy for your product teams to produce those and sign them so that they're authenticatable, and send and put them in your hands, or even make them available at a place that your customers can just go out and grab them without you needing to get involved. So super critical to have these types of assets ready in order to have these fast self-managed sales that we're talking about here today. And the last thing I want to talk about around being ready and being successful with self-managed selling is get whatever insight you can into your customers and take advantage of it, right? Your system should have some sort of telemetry. If it doesn't, hey, you're a stakeholder too for that product. Go to the product team and say, I need to know if someone's going to churn. I need to know if people are doing well with their trials and going to and liable to convert. Understand, has their system been up? Has it gone away? All of these types of things, if you've got telemetry around that and observability into it, then you're going to be more effective as an account executive, as an SE, as a member of an account team in making your customers successful, which will in turn make you more successful. So those are just a few things that you need to know in order to be successful selling your self-managed offerings. And we're going to do a future event where I'm going to talk with some of our customers who've been very successful around how they do that. With that, thank you. I'm Chuck D'Antonio. I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering at Replicated. Here's a few different places you can find me. You got my email there. I'm CRDant on Twitter, GitHub, and a lot of other things. And then on Mastodon, CRDant at Hackaderm. So hope this was helpful and you learned a few things, maybe changed your mind a little bit. And just reach out. I'm happy to continue the conversation.